Okay, I'm actually going to go back and kind of review a little bit of two of these things, because if you watch the lecture for Friday, I finished up Adams, got you into Jefferson, but I'm actually going to go back and kind of review a couple of things about that, sort of like what we did last week, because I'm going to talk about a new thing today, and I want you to make sure that you understand how this builds up, okay? All right. Because of the situation and the hostilities between us and France, I told you guys that during the Adams administration, because of the XYZ affair, all right, because of the undeclared naval war, relations between the United States and France were pretty bad. The Federalist Party will also undertake a real effort to harm Jefferson's political party during this time. Jefferson's political party is pro-French. So they've always argued that we should be supporting the French. So the Federalists are going to go after Jefferson, and they're going to go after Jefferson's political party. We think that, and you guys with your, most of you are just now to the point where you can vote, right? So how many of you will this be the first time that you vote? Okay, or in a presidential election, most of you, right? So we kind of think that dirty politics is something new, and it's not, okay? And dirty politics goes all the way back to as long as there's been politics, okay? And so this is a great opportunity the Federalists feel to go after Jefferson. The Federalists dominate Congress. The Federalists can push this stuff through, and Adams is going to sign it. And so what you end up with are two series, or really two blobs, of acts called the Alien and Sedition Acts. Okay? They are targeted at the people that the Federalists believe will support Jefferson. Okay? So it goes after people that the Federalists have targeted as supporters of Jefferson. One is immigrants, and that's the Alien Acts. Okay? The Alien Acts are all about immigration and citizenship, okay? A lot of people were coming to America from Europe, especially from France, to escape if they could, to escape the damage from the French Revolution, the wars of the French Revolution. And the Federalists believe that once those guys got here, because Jefferson's pro-French, once they became citizens, they would support Jefferson's political party. And so the Federalists decided to go after them. The first one, notice what it did. It made it longer. It took you longer to become a citizen. You had to be here, instead of 5 years, the Federalists expanded that to 14 years. So it made it more difficult and longer for you to become a citizen. Okay, so the Naturalization Act increased that time of eligibility. And then the president was given power to arrest people and deport them if he needed to, who were problems, okay? The Alien Enemies Act, the president was given the power to arrest or expel enemies in times of declared war. The Alien Act, the president can expel all aliens deemed dangerous to the peace and safety of the United States, which of course is kind of ambiguous, right? All right. So this is all about immigration. It's all about people coming into America. And what it was going to do, at least what the Federalists believed it would do, is it would give them power to either keep them from becoming citizens, or if they became problems, to boot them out. Okay? So, and that's a big chunk of the people that would support Jefferson in that case. Okay? All right, so that's the alien part of the Alien and Sedition Acts. The Sedition Act made it a crime to impede the operation of any law, made it illegal to publish or speak any false, scandalous, and malicious criticism of high government officials, including the president. All right, you guys all know, I hope, that you can give that a cursory reading and realize that it violates what? Yes, it violates the First Amendment. Okay, it violates the Constitution. Okay. Now, there's a fine line. Okay. You guys hear about crimes today that are and do go beyond free speech. Okay. Slander and libel are two examples. Okay. You can't just slander someone. Okay, you can't just publish false and misleading without sources or incorrect information about someone that damages them. Okay, so that will get you in trouble. Okay, so slander and libel are exceptions really to what we would deem free speech. Okay, now later the court is going to have to deal with this. Okay. And there are certain limitations to free speech even today. Okay? You can't slander, you can't libel. Can you go into a crowded theater and yell fire or gun and not be held responsible if someone gets stampeded? No. Okay? That's not covered under free speech. Okay? So there are just certain limitations to it. But in this case, you can see where it goes over the line. I hope you can. Okay? Illegal to publish or speak any false, which would be covered under libel and under slander. Scandalous, malicious criticism of high government officials, which basically meant that you can't criticize the government. And that does go over the edge. Okay? All right. The reaction to this is pretty swift. Okay, and it comes from Jefferson and Madison, okay, who both believe, remember Jefferson's the vice president, okay, so they both realize that, hey, this is not cool, okay, this goes over the edge. But the problem they face is one that we're going to deal with today, okay, because I want to take you through this because this is a huge part of how our government works that hasn't been defined by the Constitution up until this point, okay? And so it takes us out of the Adams administration and into the Jefferson administration to kind of figure out how this works. The question becomes, how do you deal with a law passed by Congress, signed by the president, that appears to violate the Constitution? Okay? How do you deal with that? What it means is, what we hope is, that we have a way to rectify this. The whole reason that we structured the Constitution the way we did, by splitting powers among three branches, was to keep one branch from becoming too powerful and ganging up on the others. Okay? But it does give you the possibility now that you could have two branches gang up together, and that could be a problem. So in this case, this is what Jefferson and Madison believe is happening, that the executive branch and the legislative branch are being manipulated by one political party, the Federalists, to do things that violate the Constitution. So how do you deal with that? In Jefferson's mind, the answer is the states, okay? Because remember, Jefferson is a big proponent of the powers of the state, okay? So, Jefferson and Madison are going to write two resolutions. Jefferson writes the one that Kentucky will take up. Madison writes the one that Virginia will take up. So two states are actually going to take up these resolutions and actually pass them out of their state legislatures, okay? Jefferson writes the one for Kentucky, Madison writes the one for Virginia. But basically, these Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, or the Virginia and Kentucky resolves, okay, as they become known, are important because they get us into a sinkhole that we're going to have a bit of trouble getting out of. Okay? In Jefferson's mind and in Madison's mind, the Constitution is an agreement between the states. Each state has the right to judge for itself when the Constitution had been violated. Because remember, there's not a whole lot in the Constitution, there's no description of this, right? There's no real process for dealing with something that we think violates the Constitution. And what Jefferson and Madison both came to the conclusion was that a state can declare a law of Congress unconstitutional. All right, whoa. Do you guys remember when I told you about the excise tax on whiskey, and those farmers refused to pay, and Washington rode out and told them that they would pay it or get shot? Okay? The federal law supersedes laws of the state. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Federal law trumps everything. Okay? But here, Jefferson and Madison are saying that if a state deems a law to be unconstitutional, that state has the right to declare it unconstitutional and essentially refuse to do what? Obey it, right? All right. What's the problem with that? Because it's a big problem. Trust me, it's going to come back to haunt us. We are going to deal with the ramifications of this all the way to what you guys will be working on the last week of class, which is what? The Civil War. Okay? This is a problem that we have to deal with and will continue to deal with. Okay? Jefferson and Madison here open up a Pandora's box, okay? Because it sets a precedent for something that we will continue to deal with. States' rights, okay, sectionalism, the ability of a state to declare a law that it disagrees with unconstitutional. And just a few years down the road, when we get to Jackson's administration, South Carolina is going to be so unhappy about a tariff that Congress passes, okay, a tax, essentially, okay, that it declares that tax null and void. It nullifies it. It declares that law to be unconstitutional. And Jackson gets ready to go to war with South Carolina. What had Washington done? Gathered up the army and gone and threatened them to enforce the law. And so what's Jackson going to do? The same thing. Okay? This is a serious breach that we have to deal with and will continue to deal with. All right. I've built this up, okay? But in the short term, it really doesn't matter. Okay? Neither state really, you don't see any state like Virginia or any other states besides Virginia and Kentucky take this issue up. There's no 10 or 12 states that are threatening the national government to leave the Constitution if they don't change. No. Okay? In the short term, nothing really happens. But it sets that precedent, and we will have to continue to deal with it. And the question of what do we do when we think something is unconstitutional hasn't really been solved. Okay? All right. Adams, I told you guys, does an excellent job of resisting his party. His party wanted him to go to war. He doesn't. Instead, he finds a way to negotiate with France, even though we do go to war for a couple of years, undeclared. Okay? We don't break out into all-out war, and we find a way to essentially make peace with France. He bucks his own party, and that is going to cost him, because in the election of 1800, okay, Adams is not going to win. Okay? Now, what really happens is a lot of the Federalists are going to withdraw support for Adams in the next election. They're not going to support him like they should. They're not going to push his presidency or his nomination like they should. And as a result, you get the election of 1800, and you get the revolution of 1800. All right. I want to talk a little bit about this because it's something that does confuse students a lot. What happens in this election? This is the second election in a row that we have something wonky happen. Okay? If you guys remember, in 1796, Adams gets elected president and Jefferson got elected vice president, and they're from two separate parties. Okay? So they try to work this out, and then in 1800, you're going to have something else wonky happen. Okay? And I want to kind of make sure that you know that. The Democratic Republicans, Jefferson's party, choose two people. One should become president, of course. One should get the second most votes and become vice president. Okay? That's the way it should work. And so Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr are selected. Okay? So they are the Jeffersonian Republican nominees. If you look down here, you see that there are actually three Federalist candidates, okay, that technically get an electoral vote. John Adams, Pinckney, and John Jay. A couple things I want you to notice, okay? Number one, the blue areas on the map are where the Federalists got their support from. New England, okay? The Federalists are becoming a regional party. They're only really going to get support from New England and areas in the north, okay? Notice that Jefferson gets Georgia, South Carolina, splits with North Carolina, but gets Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, splits with Tennessee, and even wins New York, which is Hamilton's home state, okay? Because, where's this guy from? Where's Burr from? New York, okay? This is pretty sly, right? You get a New Yorker and you get a Southerner, okay? And you see how they're starting to learn about how to play politics, okay? All right, the election is held in 1800. And everything looks great for Jefferson and Burr because they win. Except, what do you notice? They tie. They receive an equal number of electoral votes. It is a tie. All right. Now, what you would think, everybody and their brother knows that who's running the show here? Who's the head of the party, for God's sakes? Jefferson, right? So the smart thing would have been for Burr to say, what? I'm going to become vice president. I'm going to let Jefferson win. Okay? That doesn't happen. Instead, because of what the Constitution says, if there is a tie coming out of the Electoral College, it gets thrown into the House of Representatives. So the House of Representatives must decide. The House of Representatives is dominated by the Federalists. Okay? So now think about what you have here. Okay? You have a body dominated by your rival political party who now gets to choose who is going to be president. What a disaster. Okay? So not only do they screw it up and have it end in a tie, but now they manage to get it thrown into the House of Representatives, where essentially Hamilton is going to push his representatives one way or the other. What a nightmare. Okay? We have to fix this, and we will. Okay, we will have to write an amendment to the Constitution. In a few years, the 12th Amendment to the Constitution is going to be added that fixes this somewhat. Okay? Because we've had 2 disastrous elections as a result of the old system. Okay? All right. The House of Representatives will work on this for months. They actually cast 34 ballots, each which comes back tied. So for months, from the time the election is held in November to when Congress comes back into session in January, we don't know who the president is. And then for weeks after Congress comes back into session, we still don't know. There comes a time when we have to inaugurate the president, and that has to be done. Okay, the election has to be decided. And it does not look like the House of Representatives is going to break this deadlock. There were rumblings from all over the country. Virginia had called up its militia, and it was about to send its militia to Washington, D.C. to force them to make a decision. Now, the man behind all this is Hamilton. And Hamilton and Jefferson, you guys should know, do not get along with one another. Okay? They have been rivals. They do not like each other. They stand for different things. They have been heated rivals ever since the days they served on Washington's cabinet, even before. The only person that Hamilton probably hated more than Jefferson, though, was Aaron Burr. So, he and Burr had not seen eye to eye for lots of reasons, and Hamilton has to make a decision. He believes that Jefferson is the lesser of 2 evils and begins to push his party members towards Jefferson. It takes a while for him to sway the party that way. On the 35th ballot, somebody cast a blank ballot, and Jefferson wins. So it takes 35 ballots. But Jefferson is finally nominated as president, declared the winner in the House of Representatives on the 35th ballot. Now, the election of 1800 is strange for lots of reasons, okay? It's strange because of all this, okay? It's strange because it takes so long to decide it. It's strange because we call it the Revolution of 1800. Okay, it's the first time you have a rival political group take power from an established political group. And it does, and we do so bloodlessly. Okay, and that's a big deal. This hasn't happened anywhere else. This never happens in the rest of the world. But it happens here. Okay? So if you lose gracefully, and you turn over power peacefully to those people that come in. And it's been a tradition, it's been an established tradition since 1800. Okay, so for over 200 years we've done this. And I hope, of course, that we can continue to do so. So it is a revolutionary election. It is a somewhat disastrous election that prompts an amendment. Okay, and the aftermath of it is also interesting, which is kind of what we're going to deal with a little bit today. Okay. All right. I told you guys that Jefferson is, if you go and watch the lecture from Friday, Jefferson's a different guy. Okay? He dresses commonly sometimes. He would go and answer the door if you came to knock and knocked on the president's door. He would come and answer the door. Rode his horse everywhere. Okay? So he was just kind of a different guy. Okay? He was very charming when he had to be. He was very charismatic when he had to be. So he's a different kind of guy. And we end up talking about Jeffersonian democracy, okay? That Jefferson's idea of what democracy is. This is a republic, but it's a democratic republic, okay? And what does democracy mean? Literally what? Rule by the people, right? The demos for the Greeks were people. Okay, so for Jefferson, Jefferson believed that common people were the key to America's success. They needed to be educated. That was what would prepare them for participation in the government. Because remember, the Federalists believe only elites should be in the government because they're the ones that are educated. That's an idea that goes all the way back to Voltaire. Okay, it goes back to the Enlightenment. Okay, that people needed to be educated in order to participate in politics. Okay, and so Jefferson is a champion of education. It's what prepares you for participation in the government. It's what prepares you for being a citizen. Okay, and like his, really in some ways like the Federalists, it's these people, the educated people, that Jefferson believes should be the ones that rule. He was a big believer in rural America. Okay, he is a big believer in the ideas of farmers. Okay, during his presidency, you're going to see him try, in certain cases, to actually tone down the power of the national government. He believed remember, Federalists believe in strong central government. And he actually believed that the Federalists had given too much power to the central government. And he's going to try to walk that back a little bit. Okay? But in trying to do so, he may actually have expanded presidential power because of some of the things he does. Okay? Louisiana Purchase, for example. Okay? So, keep that in mind, okay? All right. One of the biggest issues that pops up in Jefferson's first term is this, a Supreme Court case. Marbury versus Madison, 1803. Okay? This story about the Marbury case goes all the way back to election night or to inauguration eve, which is why I'm going to tell you the story now. Okay? But it takes a couple of years for this to work its way into the Supreme Court and then be decided. Time out. Everybody look and listen. The Marbury versus Madison case is probably among a small group of cases some of the most important cases that the Supreme Court has ever decided. Okay, Marbury is way up there, okay, with Brown versus Board of Education, okay, maybe McCulloch versus Maryland, okay. Marbury is so important, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay, so it's a story that we have to go back to the inauguration, basically, to tell, okay. When Congress came back into session in January, while it's trying to decide who's going to become president, Congress also, because it's Federalist dominated, passed a new Judiciary Act. Okay, that new Judiciary Act created dozens of new federal courts. Okay, over 30 new federal courts, all of which needed a judge. So as soon as the act was passed and signed by Adams, okay, he's still president. The inauguration hadn't happened yet. So he is still president, and he begins to make those appointments. Okay? Adams is Secretary of State is a guy named John Marshall. The John Marshall from the XYZ affair. Okay? Marshall is Adams' Secretary of State by now. And Marshall was supposed to go out and deliver these appointments as soon as Adams made them and the Senate confirmed them. Okay? So as soon as that happened, Marshall was supposed to get out and deliver these. Okay? And for the most part, he did. Okay? The story goes is that Adams stayed up really until midnight of the inauguration eve, basically, making these appointments, which would then be delivered by Marshall. But Marshall drops the ball on several of them. He doesn't get them delivered. Okay? So about 17 of the appointments don't get delivered. Okay? And so Marshall essentially leaves them on the desk of the president for his successor to deal with. So these are appointments that have been made, just not delivered. Okay? All right. Jefferson's inaugurated the next day. Okay, yay, party, woo! Okay, when Jefferson finally comes to work, though, he finds on his desk this stack of papers that Adams had left behind. And of course, Adams and his new Secretary of State, Madison, okay, look at these and go, what the heck are these? Then they realize that these are all those appointments that Adams had made. One, they're very angry. And two, they decide not to deliver those that were left on the desk. Why? Adams is a Federalist. All of the appointments that he had made to these judgeships were all what? Federalists. Jefferson's not a big fan of the court anyway, okay? And so he's like, we're not doing it, okay? And so he tells Madison, we are not going to deliver these appointments. Everybody with me so far? Okay, that's the backstory. One of the guys who doesn't get his appointment is this guy, William Marbury. Marbury was supposed to be the new Justice of the Peace for Washington, D.C. So he's one of these guys that should have and was supposed to get an appointment, okay, which is never delivered. Well, he asked Madison about it, and Madison says that, well, nope, not going to get it. Okay? Marbury's furious. What does he do? It's a court case, people. What do you think he does? He sues. Okay? So he sues the Secretary of State for that appointment. What he asked the court to do is, in legal terms, is deliver a writ of mandamus. Okay? All right? Basically, what he wants the court to do is to force Madison to deliver the appointment. Okay? So he sues. And it takes a while for all of it to work its way through the court. In fact, it doesn't happen until 1803. Okay? All right. When the court gets ready, it's going to deliver its opinion. And that opinion is going to be delivered by the new Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Anybody know who it is? Marshall. The guy that didn't deliver the papers. Okay? Who has now been named to the Supreme Court. Question. Should Marshall even be able to rule on this? I mean, he has a stake in this, right? So he probably should have been, in some ways, excluded from this ruling. He's not. Well, anyway, the court is going to deliver its opinion, okay? And like I said, we call it the Marbury versus Madison case. When you write Supreme Court cases, okay, in your notes, in your papers, whatever, you always put the date after it, okay? Marbury versus Madison, 1803. Usually, since you can't write in italics, you underline them in your notes, okay? But they're usually italicized, and the date is given afterwards. All right. Here's Marshall's opinion, okay? Now, I'm not going to hit you with a whole bunch of legalese, okay? But here's what Marshall rules, okay? Marshall rules that there will be no writ issued, and that Marbury is not going to get his appointment, okay? Well, if you're Jefferson and Madison, what do you think? Woohoo! We won, right? And on the surface, that's what it looks like, okay? So this joker sued us. He doesn't get his appointment. Woohoo! We win. And you might think that until you read the rest of it, okay? Marshall rules that the reason that Marbury doesn't get his appointment is that part of the law that created that appointment, okay, the Judiciary Act of 1801, okay, and even part of some of the other Judiciary Acts that have come along, okay, violate the Constitution. So when you look at this opinion, Marshall has ruled, the Supreme Court has ruled that these laws passed by Congress and signed by the President are null and void because they're what? Unconstitutional. Unconstitutional. Whoa. Okay. Several things happen here. Number one, we call this precedent, this judicial precedent, okay, judicial review. Essentially what Marshall claims here is that the Supreme Court has the power to review any law, any action taken by Congress and the President to determine whether or not they are constitutional. We call that judicial review. Does the court still use this power today? Absolutely. The power of the Supreme Court goes from here to what? Why? The court's just not out there enforcing law anymore. What's the court doing? Monitoring the other two branches. This is when the check and balance for the Supreme Court, judicial review, puts it into a much more powerful situation. The power of the court radically increases because of Marshall. When Jefferson and Madison figure that out, they're what? They're furious. Why? Jefferson doesn't like the courts in the first place, okay? But what else? What did I tell you he was trying to do? Roll back some of the power of the federal government, right? Well, here you have the federal court system doing what? Getting radically what? Stronger. Jefferson is furious. Jefferson stupidly, by the way, this is one of the dumbest things he does during his presidency. There are a lot of dumb things that Jefferson does during his presidency, but this is one of them. Jefferson is so angry, he attacks the court. tries to impeach one of the Supreme Court justices. My name's Salmon Chase. Basically, it fails. And the only thing that they could find wrong with Justice Chase is that he was just a belligerent old cuss. And he was. Okay? But that did not meet the threshold for being turned out of the court. Just because you're a jerk doesn't mean that you can get tossed out of the court. And it hurts Jefferson. It makes Jefferson look like a bully. This actually happened to Franklin Roosevelt. When Franklin Roosevelt became president later on during the Depression, the Supreme Court began to declare some of Franklin Roosevelt's acts some of his New Deal acts unconstitutional. And Roosevelt angrily decided to try to pack the court. He wanted to add new Supreme Court justices to the court that he would then appoint. He would appoint people that would rule in his favor, and he could get over this hump of the court always tearing down his New Deal stuff. And the people, and a lot of his, not only his enemies, but a lot of people that supported Roosevelt found that to be kind of offensive. It's like a power grab, okay? And nobody really liked it. People got really unhappy about it. So the same thing sort of happens to Jefferson here too. But the Marbury versus Madison case, okay, is huge. Okay, do you think I'm going to ask you about the Marbury versus Madison case on the next test? Yeah, okay. So Marbury versus Madison is huge for the court and huge for the nation. This is one of the solutions we finally got about what to do if an act violates the Constitution. Who do we have to trust to make that decision now? The court, right? Jefferson's not convinced, okay? Because remember, he's a states' right guy. Marshall becomes one of the most important Supreme Court justices, okay? He will dominate the Supreme Court for 34 years, long after really his own political party dies out, okay? He was it's kind of ironic. He's a cousin to Thomas Jefferson, attended the College of William and Mary. He was an attorney, had served with Washington during the Revolution. So Marshall is a committed Federalist. And as a Federalist, he makes decisions on the court, even long after the Federalists have died out, that would side with strong central government. Okay? And you're going to see some of these. We will continue to talk about the Marshall Court. The Marbury versus Madison case is just their first run-in. Okay? But there are going to be others. And some of them very important others as well. All right, we'll stop there. Okay? What we'll do on Wednesday to kind of give you guys a preview is I'm going to talk about the Louisiana Purchase, okay, which is everybody will tell you is Jefferson's biggest accomplishment. Okay? It's a strange story, again, because Jefferson can't do anything simple, it seems like. Okay? It's a strange story about how we managed to get it, okay, and what Jefferson has to do to get it constitutional, okay, or constitutionally. And then we're going to talk about, really, what we start to talk about is the last part of this chapter, which is the build-up to the War of 1812, okay? So that's where we're headed, okay? All right, so I'll see you guys. I won't see you guys again, but, all right, you guys will hear me for the next couple of times. Our test, we're going to come up on pretty soon, probably next week. Okay, now remember, Monday we don't come to class, right? Next Monday we don't come to class. Some of you looking at me like, what? Okay, it's fall, whatever, fall break, Columbus Day, whatever it is, okay? So you guys technically will not be here. So what I'm going to ask you probably to do is to come on Friday, okay? I'm not going to, I don't know, I'll think about it. I'll let you guys know. I'll send out an email about what we're going to do about next week, okay? So I hate to ask you to do that because it's just such a pain. So, but I'll let you know. But we're getting to that point to where we're going to have our next test, because when we get finished with Jefferson and the War of 1812, it's test time. Okay, so I'll go ahead and put up the study guide for that this week too. Okay, all right, so be looking for that. All right, see you guys.